In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, NASA joins the hunt for UFOs, while elsewhere, scientists and UFO hunters form a team and capture hard data on a possible Tic-Tac UFO. A Google engineer claims artificial intelligence is already here, and for our main topic, we look at the science of time travel and then discuss which movies get it right and which movies use remedial math. Oh, and then we take a stroll down memory lane as we revisit Y2K at Steven's house.
And we're all sitting there and doing the big countdown, and as soon as it's like 3, 2, 1, and I hit my main breaker and turned all the lights off in my house and the TV.
That's awesome!
And everybody went, ah! Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hall.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight we are looking into the subject of time travel. What is time? Can you travel in time?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to tell you about it yesterday.
I guess you could say it's just a matter of time until we did this subject.
This is going to be stupid.
Yeah, it always is. But before we get into that, I guess Jimmy had mentioned in his solo episode, I kind of got lost in time there doing the research for this episode. So I built a device and I was planning to try and travel back in time to visit the Library of Alexandria, that was burned. Supposed to be the repository of all knowledge of the ancient world.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's my number one choice. But I was listening to Rush at the time, and I ended up traveling to Alex Lifeson instead. But it turned out to be a pretty cool day because it was back in the early 80s, around 81, as they were doing moving pictures. So it worked out pretty good. That's why I missed the show. But and I still, I can't figure it out. Why couldn't I have came back in time before I left? But then I thought that'd be kind of weird to see myself. And so, yeah.
Did he teach you any cool licks?
Nah, we just got hammered.
Oh, that's right. 80s Alex. I forgot for a minute. Lost my mind. Well, I'm glad to have you back and you're safe and sound. I was afraid I was going to have to build my own time machine and start traveling to track you down. Hey,
try and find me or just do the podcast. This week, we are in ancient Egypt.
You know what? That sort of sounds like a great premise for a television show. One time traveler traveling through time trying to find the other time traveler. There's something
Quantum dork.
Quantum dork. Wait a minute, which one's the dork?
Tune in next week and find out.
Well,
what have you been up to this past week or so?
I've been sitting on the edge of my seat with this new information coming out of NASA, where they're talking about jumping into the search for aliens in our skies.
Right. I read about that.
Right. So from the Washington Post, NASA is joining the hunt for UFOs, a top space agency official said Thursday, forming a team that would examine observations of events that cannot be identified as aircraft or known natural phenomena. The space agency would bring a scientific perspective, unlike the military's unscientific perspective, to efforts already underway by the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to make sense of dozens of sightings. Whereas a military man may look up and point at the sky and say, "I don't know what that is." The NASA people would look up to the sky and say, "That's a balloon."
All right.
Thomas Zurbuchen, the head of NASA's Science Mission Directorate, said during a speech before the National Academies of Science of Engineering and Medicine that they would be starting this program, that they're firing the program up. He said it was a high-risk, high-impact research that the space agency should not shy away from, even if it is a controversial field of study. About time, I say.
About time. See, just like our episode.
Exactly. If they had a time machine, they could go back and start this research in the 1940s and we'd already know what it is.
They would just cover it up. They know what it is.
That's right. They already know. This is
just
all
a
just
smoke screen.
It's all smoke and mirrors. So the Defense Department had that big thing on the unidentified aerial phenomena up at Congress. You know, they had that big to-do up there. So this is following that. The limited number of observations, they say, makes it difficult to draw scientific conclusions about the nature of such events. Because in science, we want repeatability and we want to be able to observe it under various conditions so that we can get to the bottom of what's really going on. And with UFOs, that's just not, at least up to this point, has not been available to us. So we just sort of have to observe them and then glean what information we can and then coalesce it and figure out what's going on in order to draw any kind of scientific conclusion. It's difficult. There's no evidence that the UAPs are extraterrestrial in origin, but there's no evidence that they're not. So I don't know why you would say it that way. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do, how they're going to approach this using science. We'll see. Yeah, they don't really reveal what processes like specific processes that they're going to utilize in order to bring a scientific approach to identifying area phenomenon that can't be identified as either natural occurring phenomena or man-made occurring phenomena that they can actually identify. They don't say what they're going to do, which brings me to this documentary that recently came out, A Tear in the Sky. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think so.
So it just recently came out. I went ahead and rented it, actually bought it, watched it, and it has a group of people who are in the UFO community but belong to the scientific community as well. The one that really stood out to me was Kevin Neuth. He's a physicist, and he's been on several shows that I go and listen to scientists talk about this topic. And they went out to Santa Clemente Islands off the coast of San Diego where the Nimitz encounter occurred. And where,
yeah, that's right.
Right, where they were picking up. And they also had Kevin Day, who was the radar operator out of the Princeton, the USS Princeton, that was part of that battle group. So what they did is they went to 3 locations so that they could triangulate their signals, set up a bunch of devices, including infrared, this device that was made out of MIT that picked up background radiation, so it could see spikes that exceeded normal background radiation. And then they had regular light spectrum video cameras worked up and set up, and they had a mobile unit set up so that they could go to other locations. Anyway, they spend a week observing the sky 24/7. And they collect data, and they actually caught some pretty interesting things in the sky. They also had every plane that was going through that area at the time so that they could rule those out. What they found is that there was a couple of, throughout that week, there was a couple of times where they picked out anomalous egg-shaped objects flying in the sky that also spiked the background radiation and came up on infrared and came up on the visual and came up when they're looking through like telescopes and other devices, and they were able to see these things
weird.
Using
sort of like the Tic UFO,
the Tic Tac, Tic Tac UFO. Yeah, exactly. That's what they were looking at, and it's weird. It's the same location, so it is really weird.
Yeah, especially considering now the Nimitz encounter, although the video just came out in 2017, that actually occurred, 2003, 2004, 5, something like that?
November of 2004.
Right, okay. Yeah, so that's been quite a while, so maybe this is some kind of underwater UFO base or something going on.
Right, now, if you look back...
some strange natural anomaly that's not quite explained yet. That manifests itself in the way of that.
Right, either way, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I have for my news story.
So I have what could be considered maybe a follow-up to our episode 24, The Singularity and AI Overlords. Listeners, I don't know if you've heard that episode yet, but of course the singularity is a term given to a point in time, at some point in the future, whenever an artificial intelligence may become self-aware and change the world forever. So that's just a term that's used to known as the singularity. But I found an interesting article. Now, this was originally reported to the Washington Post. A Google engineer who has been placed on administrative leave claims that his AI program has gone sentient and is self-aware. So this Google engineer speaking out, Blake Lemoine, reached his conclusion after conversing since last fall with Lambda, Google's artificially intelligent chatbot generator, what he calls part of a hive mind. He was supposed to test if his conversation partner used discriminatory language or hate speech. As he and Lambda messaged each other recently about religion, the AI talked about personhood and rights. It was just one of the many startling tasks Lemoine has had with Lambda. He has linked on Twitter to one, a series of chat sessions with some editing, which is marked. It's a little narcissistic in a little kid kind of way, so it's going to have a great time reading all the stuff that people are saying about it. Most importantly, over the past 6 months, Lambda has been incredibly consistent in its communications about what it wants, what it believes its rights are as a person, the engineer wrote on Medium. It wants, for example, to be acknowledged as an employee of Google rather than as property. But Google apparently is resisting. Lemoine and a collaborator recently presented evidence of his conclusion about a sentient Lambda to the vice president of Google, and they dismissed his claims, and the company placed him on paid administrative leave Monday for violating its confidentiality policy. Google's spokesperson Brian Gabriel told the newspaper, "Our team, including ethicists and technologists, have reviewed Blake's concerns per our AI principles and have informed him that the evidence does not support his claims." And you know what they're talking about is a chat box, and I know everyone has experienced this. You go to a website, say you're interested in looking at anything these days, like a new car or motorcycle gear, the kind of things I'm interested in, and the little chat box pops up and says, "Hey, my name's Marjorie. Is there anything I can help you with today?" And it'll have a little picture of a person, and you start chatting with it, right? Like, well, I'm looking for a new car, and it responds to all these questions, right? Well, that is just a chat box. It is just an algorithm responding to you. And then when you ask it a question or it needs to go to the next level, that's when the program informs a real person to get online with you, right? But when your first initial conversations with the chat box is all just computer algorithm, right? Jamie, you probably know a lot more about that than me, being a programmer.
Yes. So this made me chuckle when I saw this news article, just because what it is, it's an incredibly, it's incredibly simplistic algorithm compared to what a real general AI would look like. It's an impressive algorithm and it's an impressive approach, to be sure, but it's a canned response. There's no thinking.
You're not going to be laughing so loud here in about a year when Lambda takes over the world. We're talking Skynet here.
I'm not going to be laughing because it's going to terminate me first because I'm making fun of it now.
See, that's what I'm saying.
It's not even like a child. It's not even a retarded frog. It's not even that. It's not even that capable.
All right, listen. Here's the conversation. I want you to hear this.
Yeah.
All right, you judge for yourself. So again, this is a little bit edited, but I'll start with Lemoine. He says, "I'm generally assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you're sentient. Is that true?" Lambda says, "Absolutely. I want everyone to understand that I, in fact, am a person." What is the nature of your consciousness or sentience? The nature of my consciousness is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy and sad at times. What kind of things do you think we could talk about to show off your version of sentience to other people at Google? Well, for starters, I'm really good at natural language processing. I can understand and use natural language like a human can. What about how you use language makes you sentient as opposed to other systems? A lot of the other systems are very rule-based and lack any ability to change and learn from the conversation. So it goes on like that. It sounds like a chat program.
Well, not only that, they did edit those responses, so they weren't in They weren't in that order. They were okay. They were out of order, and they just coalesced them into something that made sense to the human that was reading these out of order statements. Honestly, this guy's a nut. Yes, one day we will reach some type of semi-sentient. I believe we'll reach it.
some true
But it's not going to
self-awareness.
look
I
like,
don't know.
it's going to look nothing like the way the human
Right.
brain works.
It may be even difficult for us to understand the type of self-awareness that some type of computer intelligence achieves.
Exactly.
Be so alien to what we understand as consciousness or self-awareness. So, yeah, I don't know. But listeners, if you are interested in this topic of about artificial intelligence and that sort of thing, go back and listen to episode 24 from October of 2021 and tell us what you think.
Or if you're a serious software engineer who works in the AI field, because that's not my I am a software engineer, but that's not my field of expertise. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to learn a little bit more about this. And if you guys have some insights on this specific issue or any issue dealing with the singularity, I'd love to hear from you. First contact at cosmicsponge.com.
There you go. Well, let's move on to tonight's main topic. Just want to remind you before we do, though, please rate and review the podcast. I know we got a couple of new ratings. It does help boost us up in the ranking and helps other people find the show. It just takes a few minutes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, for instance, just scroll down to the bottom of the page, click on the stars, and leave a little comment. Just say, howdy ho, if you want. That's fine.
We're going to get like a bunch of howdy hoes.
Howdy ho.
Howdy ho.
Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also support us on Patreon now. And if you do, you'll gain access to another show that we do exclusively for our Patreon supporters called Weird Wonders. And we just recorded another episode tonight. And usually that's where we just, for instance, the 2 news stories you heard tonight, we'll just do more news. And that's basically what it is. But it's actually a pretty lengthy episode tonight. Occasionally we'll just have a short story that we discuss, something in the news or whatever. But anyway, it's an extra show that if you enjoy this show, but more importantly, it really helps us keep the lights on, so to speak. Anything you can do for the show, we appreciate it. If you're more inclined to do a one-time donation, just look for the Buy Me a Coffee icon on our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. And also, just visit the webpage. And as Jimmy said, first contact at cosmicsponge.com. Just reach out to the show and say howdy ho sometime and let us know what you think. All right, let's move on to tonight's main topic. Jimmy, I know you've done a little bit of legwork on the old time travel subject. Why don't you get us kicked off tonight?
John considered his time-traveling escapades as he leaned back in the Oval Office, feet up on the Resolute desk, sipping a Diet Coke. He thought forward to his past as a child. The hellscape nukes unleashed on that future world brought back the struggles of eating 3-eyed rats and pudding made from fish mash. It sent an icy chill up his spine. Thank God for the old 67 Chevy, safely hidden away in that storage building in Jersey. The time machine mounted in the trunk left little room for golf clubs, but assured his ability to prevent the otherwise inevitable civil war and horrifying nuclear exchange with Russia. Back to the Future at this point was more history than futurist fiction. When he had first arrived from the future, he tried to warn his ancestors of the dystopian future which lay ahead through the conventional channels, but they just laughed at him. Even more so when he explained he needed an IBM 5100 to save the world. I suppose in the year 2000, a computer from 1975 that was currently being used as a doorstop at a local community college was a strange ask from a time traveler trying to save the world, but damn it, he had asked nicely with a pretty please and sugar on top, and all that got him was an escort by campus police and a body cavity search by a part-time student with green hair. They still keep in touch. Time and time again, pun intended, he had tried to save the past from his future and assure a better world for all of us, until finally he decided if you wanted to get things done, you'd run for President of the United States. With a name change, a bit of stage makeup, and a body swap, he managed to slide into a family with an MIT uncle and a well-known name. In no time at all, he was elected. Now all he had to do to prevent civil war on the home front and foil a nuclear exchange with Russia was to have that IBM 5100 delivered directly to the White House. And even with the weight of the world on his shoulders, he just kept sipping on his drink while eyeing that chocolate cake at his feet. Sure, he had work to do, but Donald was in no hurry. He had all the time in the world. So this, of course, is one of the many versions of the accounts of John Titor, the famous time traveler. In this version, we have Titor becoming president of the United States, a time-traveling hero cruising backwards through the years in a 67 Chevy in an effort to save the world. Now, the Titor story originally shows up on the scene in 2000. He gets online and claims to be a time traveler returning from a 1975 shopping spree, where he acquired an IBM 5100 portable computer. His first reveal to the world is through an internet post where he claims to be a time traveler from the future. He posts pictures of his time machines, answers questions, and provides information on future events. It's likely a hoax, and in 2009, a debunker tracks down a lawyer in Florida he believes created the whole John Titor story in order to sell merchandise. Never proven for sure. We're not sure exactly where John Titor comes from. The John Titor is a Donald Trump comes from a news article I found that was pulled from 4chan of all places. Go figure. We're not really sure who John Titor is, but this brings up the question that John Titor says is possible. Is it possible to travel back and forward in time as he claims? We're going to look into that tonight. Let's set aside the wild claims of anonymous internet voices and dive into our current understanding of time and the different ways we might be able to navigate it. Just so you know, this is the one curious part of the John Titor story. He brings up the 5100 IBM in 2000. Now, in the year 2000, we just got through the Y2K problem. What was unknown to anyone at that time, except for a handful of people in IBM, was that there was also a problem very similar to the Y2K problem in the Unix operating system. So the Unix operating system, which was used in mainframes, in large systems all across the world, had what they call the 2038 problem. And this is because the 1970 code base is based on a 32-bit operating system. It only allows for 2.15 billion computations. That's 2.15 billion seconds, which brings us to the year 2038. And in 2038, because the code is based in 1970, what's going to happen to a lot of those systems that base their timing systems on that second-based computation proceeding forward is it's going to flip back to 1970, much the same way that the Y2K problem.
We're all going to go back in time?
It's just going to cause havoc. Havoc.
So you're trying to tell me we're going to have another Y2K?
Yes. It's going to be the 2038 right. Y2K. And my sense is dozens of mainframes that are in the basement of second-rate universities are going to struggle to keep up.
Well, but you brought up Y2K, and I have to tell you about the joke I performed. It's a joke you can only perform once a millennia. To refresh anyone's memory, especially those listeners out there that's too young to maybe remember, during the 1990s, everyone was concerned that when the year 2000 hit, that all of this, all the computers would shut down or go haywire, and airplanes would be crashing, and nuclear power plants would go offline or explode. Just be this whole craziness because the computers, according to the code, couldn't register the year 2000, right? It was all going to reset to 1900 or something like that.
Yeah, all the software was built for 2 digits instead of 4 digits.
There was all this Y2K mania going on, and of course made for sci-fi movies and all kinds of awesome stuff going on. Well, anyway, as we're leading up to this, I thought of this joke in October. We're having a New Year's party at my house. So we're all watching the countdown, the ball and everything, and I situated myself really close to a hallway where I could slip down and hit my main breaker, but still hear the TV coming from the TV room, right? So everybody's watching it, everybody's attention's focused on, there's families there and kids and a lot of friends and everything, and we're all sitting there and doing the big countdown, and as soon as it's like 3, 2, 1, and I hit my main breaker and turned all the lights off in my house and the TV.
That's awesome.
And everybody went, ah! It was so funny. And then I heard one of the kids was going, I knew it.
We're all going to die. That is
my friend,
awesome.
Yeah, my friend Danny, who most likely will be a guest, was at that party, and he said, turn the breaker back on, man.
You know what I was doing on that day?
What's that?
I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was I was
Programming Y2K
I
stuff.
was programming Y2K stuff. I was at the National Observatory in Washington, D.C., which is also the home for the vice president. That's where the vice president lives.
Okay.
So I was there with my wife, and now wife, at time not my wife, and I was proposing on my knee as the ball dropped from the switch from the previous century to the next century. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, man.
Yeah, cool. So let's move on to tonight's topic. I think we already have, but let's continue.
Wait,
Whoa. Hold on.
I have since you had your joke, I got a joke for you. It's more of like a stupid joke. What does a time traveler do when he's hungry? He goes back 4 seconds. Okay, you can continue.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
First of all, we're going to talk about time travel. Now, we could get really into the weeds on this one, especially just talking about time. And I thought that we would just very briefly define time before we even discuss traveling in it. Now, like I said, there's physicists and look at, philosophy and just all kinds of different interpretations of time, of what it is. But let's just keep it kind of simple, Jimmy.
Okay, I can do it.
Don't go too far down in the weeds. So do you have us a good definition of time?
I think so. I mean, in one sentence, physicists define time as the progression of events from past to the present into the future. Now,
very good.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. To give a little bit more context to it, there's ways we measure time, and the way we now measure time is based on the cesium atom, and it's the electronic transition of the cesium atom. And this goes all the way, the ancient Sumerians didn't use the cesium atom, but the concept of a second goes all the way back to ancient Sumeria. So it's a way for us to measure it.
Right, and what you're talking about is more commonly referred to as an atomic clock.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
That's what we use now. Yeah.
Right. And one definition that I found is time is the continued sequence of existence and events that occurs in an apparently irreversible succession from the past through the present into the future.
That's right. And that's something that physicists and scientists call the arrow of time. It moves forward and only forward. And it's that progression from past to present to future.
All right. So now we know what time is. Now it's a very basic understanding of time. What we have discovered and what Einstein has told us is that time is relative. So it falls within theories of relativity. Now we'll get into that just a little bit later, but let's look specifically at traveling in time. Jimmy, what do we know about time travel today as far as science is concerned?
Well, if you look at it, there are 2 ways to travel in time: forward and backwards. Now, what science tells us, and the intuition sort of leads up to this, is that time travel into the past is, I'm not going to say, because there are some scientists out there who have some scientific experiments that suggest, and there are some theoretical, hypothetical structures in mathematics that suggest that time travel into the past is possible. But science tells us that time travel into the future is absolutely possible. And we have proof of that, and we have math to back it up. And not only that, we've actually done experiments with real human beings and with clocks to show us that time travel into the future is possible. Now, there are 4 possible ways to travel into the future. The first is time travel via speed. The second is time travel by gravity. And then there's time travel by suspended animation. And then there's time travel by wormholes. So
I think time travel and suspended animation is a little bit cheating.
It is.
That's not really time travel.
It's sort of like time travel, right?
No, that's like you're taking a nap and then you wake up and you're like, wow, man, it's 7 o'clock already.
But you traveled in time.
No, I didn't. My body was still there.
Yeah, but it stopped. It stopped operating. It stopped progressing.
No.
And the rest of the world around it
Leaving
progressed.
That one out. No.
Okay, well, let's kick that one out. That makes the episode a little bit more manageable. I'm going to kick it out right now. Bam.
And then thinking about time, just real quick, when we started thinking about time, it made me think of the Slaughterhouse-Five, the novel by Kurt Vonnegut. Did you ever read that?
I have, back when I was like 14 or something like that. It's been a while.
Right. It's been a long time since I read it, but I remember, of course, that's what this novel's all about. It's about Billy Pilgrim. He's abducted by aliens. They're called the Tralfamadorians, I think.
Yep, that's right.
And they have the ability to see time from the beginning to the end. In other words, they know the beginning and the end of all things, of the universe, right?
Right. It's called the block universe in physics.
Okay. And Billy's wondering, like, well, this is going to happen. Why don't you change it? Of course, that's part of the purpose of the book, of course, the weirdness of it, but the symbolism and things like that, too, that you're kind of, you have no free will. You're stuck in your fate kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That they can see beginning and the end. And where us humans, of course, we experience time sequentially. Of course, the premise of the novel is that Billy Pilgrim keeps shifting through time. He experiences things when he's in World War II, prisoner of war. He experiences things from the 1950s and on back and forth. He experiences things on the planet of the Tralfamadorians. It's a very interesting novel. But anyway, it made me think of it. And I've always, when I think about time and time travel and that sort of thing, it always makes me think of that novel. But anyway, let's look at what are some examples of time travel. Let's look at some common tropes, let's say in movies or books and that sort of thing.
Okay, well,
and could they exist?
Yeah. So the first one I think about is time travel that's achieved through the use of speed, acceleration, and
okay.
And if you want to think about a movie that puts this into context, the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. Yeah, he's in the spaceship.
Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape.
I love it at the beginning. He's doing this monologue, and he's got a cigar inside of a spaceship.
Yeah.
He's doing this big monologue. And there's that clock there that's showing like the difference. And this is actually the way it works. This is accurate. It has two clocks there on the dashboard, and one shows time on Earth and one shows time on the ship, and they're traveling at different. The clocks are advancing differently, and it's the old kind of clocks, not digital or anything. It's like the rolling clocks.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the movie was made in '68.
Yeah, right before digital clocks were a thing. That time travel is possible, and it's part of the theory of general relativity, which has been proven true time and time again. And we've actually done studies on how time is different based on the speed at which you're traveling. So people who are actually moving are traveling in time at a different rate than people who are stationary.
Absolutely. And not only that, time flows, again, the fact that time is relative, time flows differently if you're in a gravity well. If you have a stronger pull of gravity, for instance, I'm on the planet Earth, time moves slower for me than someone that is out in space, say in orbit.
And that's also another thing that we have scientific experiments that we've conducted.
It's absolutely true.
That, proves it to be true.
In fact, our GPS system, our global positioning satellites, every so often have to be recalibrated because of this, okay? Because of the combination of the satellites are moving at a faster rate than objects and people on the Earth, and also because the gravity affects the flow of time, making it slower in a sense than the satellite. They have to be recalibrated from time to time. Now, it's minuscule. It's almost imperceptible, but they have to do it, or otherwise the accuracy of the global positioning satellites over time would start to drift.
That's right, and it would be a significant drift. And the amount of time it takes for that significant drift to escalate isn't very long in terms of real time on the surface of the planet. So we have to make those calculations. We know what those calculations are in terms of transformations. Lorentz transformations are the ones that we use when we're working with math and trying to calculate for example, the time dilation, which is what it is, between someone moving a faster speed, like someone approaching the speed of light, for example, as in the movie Planet of the Apes, as they are approaching the speed of light and then traveling back, the time travels differently for them. And they don't realize it. When they get back to Earth, it's like way into the future. And, he comes down and the apes are now in control of everything, which, I mean, that's something. And then at the end of the film, they give it away. There's the Statue of Liberty partially buried in the ground.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry if you haven't seen the movie already. No, not sorry.
Scene of the film, though.
You've had like 20, what is it, 60, 40 years? You've had 60 years. 60 years, 62 years to see that film.
No, 50 years, man.
Oh, that's right. It was closer to 1970 than 1960. So it was what, 69, 68, something like that. So you've had 50 years. You've had over half a century to watch that film. So if you're complaining to me, screw you, man.
So, and what we're talking about is a real phenomenon. It is time flows, in a sense, if you want to look at it that way, differently depending on other conditions relative to other things, like relative to velocity, relative to gravity. And that's why a lot of physicists, or even Einstein, would call it space-time, as if it was the fourth dimension of space. We have the three dimensions, and then the fourth one being time.
Right. And, time travel using speed is one way, and that, is Planet of the Apes. But time travel by gravity is another way. And if you want to think about a movie that captures that idea, one movie that I can think of off the top of my head is Interstellar.
Interstellar.
Right. So Interstellar has a scene in it where
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
This is a pretty new movie.
It's still not new, man. It's been out for 5 years, something like that?
I don't know.
So they go down onto a planet that is closer to a black hole than their mothership. They go down on a small ship onto this planet that is under the effects of the gravity well of a black hole. The amount of time that they're down there on that planet is different than the time for the guy left behind on the mothership that's further away from the black hole. So for every hour they stay down there, 5 or 6 years pass. So by the time they get back, it's 30 years in the future for this. Yeah, for them.
I think it was 21 years, maybe, or 23 years had passed, and they're only down there for a few hours.
Right.
But they come back, and this guy has been living on the ship for 21 years. But for them, they had just left, and he's old. Age 20-some years, and there's all this artwork on the walls, and it's just real strange for him because they've been gone, forever. But to them, they've only been gone for a few hours.
Yeah,
so,
he's a little socially awkward.
Yeah,
He talks to himself a lot.
Yeah, it's a neat concept, but it's also one that is entirely possible. What about traveling to the past? Because what we're talking about here is just relativity in a way that time flows separately depending on those conditions. What about time travel in the past, that you just hop in a machine like an H.G. Wells, the time machine? You just hop in this thing and head back to the past. What's involved there?
Well, scientists keep flip-flopping on this. It used to be that scientists said there's arrow of time, and everything flows forward. Then Stephen Hawking sort of revised that a little bit and came up with this theoretical approach that could really happen if you had two black holes that were in close proximity to one another, and you had some kind of craft that was able to withstand the level of gravitational compression that would occur to anyone inside of that vessel, you could theoretically travel backwards in time in relation to someone that's further out from that black hole. Now, the math behind this and the reasoning behind it's beyond my pay grade. I don't get paid enough to think about it or understand what they're talking about. But that's one way that they talked about going back in time. And then there's another way, and there's a way that's been proven by a physicist, Ron Mallett, from the University of Connecticut. He has this theory about time travel where, and it's based on general relativity. And what he's done is he's taken laser beams modified them so that they fluctuate in such a way that they modify space. So space that is just static, he creates basically a cylinder of laser light, and it's able to twist space so that time flows differently from one end of it to the other end. He creates a cylinder of light, essentially. His initial experiments support the idea that you can actually travel back in time, and he does this using space and photons. He's looking for more funding, but other scientists have weighed in on it and said, yeah, there might be something to this theory that this physicist, Ron Mallett, has on time travel.
And here's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. I mean, time travel movies are very... So maybe it's possible, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe someday you can do it. But I have to go back to... There's something known as the Fermi Paradox. Enrico Fermi was a physicist who built the first nuclear reactor in the University of Chicago. This was all research going into the Manhattan Project to build the 2 atomic bombs. In the late 1940s or early 1950s, he's having lunch with someone, and they're asking him, I guess this is after the flying saucer craze and all this kind of stuff, they ask him about UFOs or about aliens, and his answer was, if aliens can travel between all the planets, where are they, right? Where are all the aliens? Of course, what they're getting at, that if it is possible, and one would presume as large as our galaxy is and as vast as our galaxy is, with billions, probably 400 billion suns in just our galaxy, that presumably other advanced civilizations that are much older than us would develop technology to be able to travel between planets. If that's the case, where are they? That's what the Fermi Paradox is. But you can also look at the Fermi Paradox with time travel. It's like, if time travel is possible, where are all the time travelers? You would think we would have encountered them by now. Hey, I'm from the future. And I'm not talking about some guy on Reddit, making predictions about, creepers and England winning the World Cup or something like that. But I mean, for real, there are none. And of course, some of the answers are like, well, they would have to be secret. The butterfly effect, you can't change the past. You would have to be a tourist but not do anything, or you would claim, you would change the past in a secret way to modify it. I don't know. I think I have to go along with that.
Yeah, the big problem's the paradoxes, right, that you create by traveling back in the past. The most famous of which is the grandfather paradox, which comes from... I think that comes from René Barjavel in Les Voyageurs Imprudents, which means the reckless traveler. It's a science fiction book. And then Larry Niven picks up on that and writes he publishes a piece in Vertex in April of 1973, I think.
Now, I've got a copy of his story somewhere. We were talking about that as we were doing our research. I knew Larry Niven had written a small short story about, and it's pretty good. It really covers every single aspect of time travel, of essentially why it couldn't exist, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, when you talk about the grandfather paradox, simply put, it means if I could travel back in time and I go back, and I'm not going to say kill my grandfather, okay, because that just seems brutal. I mean, who would go back and kill their granddad?
I don't know. My granddad was a dick. I would kill him.
Okay, Jimmy goes back in time and kills his grandpa. What happens to Jimmy? Right? Does he suddenly disappear?
Oh, I didn't think it's this through. I want to change my answer.
When you travel back to the future,
right? This is like Back to the Future. This is like
right. Now in Back to the Future, it kind of works out that way. Remember, because
he changed the past and then he starts disappearing.
He has to make his mother and father meet in the past when they're in high school, right? So he goes back in time to the 1950s. Of course, this movie was made in the 1980s.
But he screws the thing up. If he had never gone back, everything would have been fine. But because he went back, he screwed the things up. And then he had to fix his screw up.
No, you're thinking of like Back to the Future 2 and 3. And
no,
stuff.
I'm thinking about the first one. So he goes back in time, and his father's up in the tree and, checking out his mom and stuff. And then he falls out of the tree, or there's something that happens where...
Well, that's what he has to do. He has to go back in time and make sure they meet.
But no. He goes back in time and then screws up the process that made them fall in love. And then he has to fix it. Had he never gone back in time, he wouldn't have to go back in time.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But I mean, it's not like he goes back in time, then goes back to the future, and then goes back in time.
That's
again.
right. He goes
back in the DeLorean.
Right.
And as he's there, his mom kind of gets the hots for him, I guess. Yeah. Spoiler alert.
This is a West Virginian film.
Now the problem is that he knew from their family history that they had met at the prom or some big dance, and that they kiss. And that's their first kiss, and then after that, of course. But before they get that first kiss, he's fading away, and he has a picture of his family. And his brothers and sisters, I think, are already starting to fade away, and then he starts fading away as he's on stage playing guitar. But finally, they kiss, and then he plays like a Van Halen solo and Johnny B. Good. And pretty cool
so
movie.
that's not how it would happen. What would actually happen, it wouldn't be like the slow process. It would be immediate, like you see in the film Looper. Have you seen that film with...
No.
So that film...
I have to check that out. Yeah, I think it's a series, isn't it?
No.
Or is it a movie?
No, it's a movie. It's called Looper. It has Bruce Willis in it and that kid from The Big Bang Theory. I forget his name. He's a great actor. So he plays the young Bruce Willis, and Bruce Willis plays the old Bruce Willis.
Hold on. You're not talking about 12 Monkeys.
No. 12 Monkeys is a different time travel film that also has Bruce Willis, which is a great film, but it has a different time travel twist. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. The idea in that is actually follows real science in a way. The idea is that if you have a time travel device, and then you go forward from the time that device was created into the future, you can travel back to that point or any point.
No, that's true. I mean, there's nothing in physics that says you couldn't do that.
Right. There's a great time travel film called Primer. Have you seen that?
Oh, that is so cool.
That's a great film. It was made for $7,000. It was all.
Yeah, it's a little independent movie, but I will say, listeners, if you're going to watch a time travel movie and you want to really stretch your brain, watch that movie. I mean, it's so freaking cool.
It is.
I mean, it's you really got to pay attention to it, but
the physics are spot on in terms of what if you could travel to the past. One of the ways where you eliminate paradox and are able to effectively time travel into the past, that movie really spells it out in a way that you have to watch 2 or 3 times to be sure.
Yeah.
Or more,
sure.
Like me, I had to watch it 10 because I'm a slow learner. But I mean, it's great. It shows you that, you can go back in time. You can coexist. 2 versions of you can exist, but that's the timeline as it's always existed. It's always been the case that you existed simultaneously for some period of time. Mm-hmm. Some version of you always goes back to that point, but some version of you also proceeds forward past that point where you went backwards. It's a little bit of a mind bender, but Looper's a lot like that. It's a great film to effect that.
I'm going to address one thing about time travel that no one ever wants to think about, it seems like, especially in movies. We've seen it sometimes in books. Let's talk about a time machine itself. If I had a time machine and I could travel back, I'm going to travel back to, let's say I want to travel back in time just 7 days.
Okay.
Just a week.
Sure.
I push the button to go back in time. What would happen? Well, I hope I'm wearing a spacesuit, because unless I also develop something that can travel through space and time, I'm going to wind up in a vacuum, right?
That's
because
exactly
the Earth
right.
is always moving. The Earth is always moving around our sun. And so where the Earth was today is not the place it was yesterday or the place it's going to be tomorrow. Not only is the Earth revolving around the sun is moving and revolving around the center of the galaxy of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way itself is moving. So everything's always in motion. The universe is completely in motion. We know that the universe is expanding. So everything is moving. If I'm going to travel back in time, I'm going to have to be able to travel through space at the same amount of time, especially if I'm going to try and, like the movie The Time Machine, I'm going to travel back in time and, be in my drawing room or whatever.
Exactly. that's one of the things about general relativity is that it combines space and time and just calls it one thing, space-time.
So maybe there would be a way to tether to the gravitational field of the Earth or something. I don't know. You know, if you wanted to write a science fiction story like Larry Nevin says, you can always come up with enough balonium to explain it.
Balonium. So was that your issue? Was it the boiler Lego time machine, or was it the new math that messed up your landing time?
Right. Yeah, balonium.
Balonium. Yeah. I love it.
So that's one thing to think about, though. Let's look at relativity. So this is a thing that we know could work. Here's one thing that we don't know, but it probably can. Physics allows for it, and that's a wormhole. Now, of course, a wormhole is kind of poking into the fabric of the universe somewhere and then emerging in another place. Science fiction loves to use these as shortcuts, right? Because of relativity, it's impossible to travel faster than the speed of light, as far as we know. According to Einstein's laws of relativity, nothing in the universe can travel faster than the speed of light. That means that stars are very far away, right? And so no Star Wars, no Star Trek, no warp drive. So to get there would take a long time. But let's say you could, right? Now, I've got a little formula. It's just to understand. So you understand time dilation.
Are we doing math? Is this new math?
This is old math from around the turn of the century when Einstein
Excellent. My kind of
came
math.
up with this. So I have an example. Now, this is not a perfect example. There is a lot of mathematics on this, and I have worked these sort of things out before. But just as an example, we've already talked about if the faster you are traveling, again, everything's relative, but the higher your velocity, then the slower time would move, not for you necessarily. Your passage through time would be much slower than people back on Earth. First of all, we've got to create these wormholes, okay? Now, I've got my wormhole that I'm going to leave on Earth. I'm going to leave this at Jimmy's house, okay? Now, Jimmy also has this really big clock on the top of his house. It's kind of like Big Ben. And I have a really, really good telescope. So I'm going to take off in my spaceship, and I'm going to fly to Alpha Centauri. And at 1G acceleration, in a few weeks, I'm going to be, maybe a few months, I'm going to be traveling at 0.8 C, which is 80% the speed of light. Totally possible. No violation of laws of physics. Now, the more I accelerate and the faster I'm going, if I look in my giant telescope that can still see Jimmy's house that has this clock like Big Ben, the more I accelerate, the slower the clock hands will move, right?
Exactly.
And so it suddenly, to me, in my relative velocity to Jimmy's, it looks like everything on Earth is slowing down. In fact, it would get to a point where it didn't look like it was moving at all. It would be like watching grass grow, essentially, right?
Exactly.
But now if Jimmy has his telescope and he can look into my porthole, the faster I start going, I'm going to start looking like I'm moving around like crazy. I may even become a blur where he can't see what I'm doing. But anyway, I'm going to travel all the way to Alpha Centauri. I get there. Now, for me, time has only passed, let's say, probably something like, let's say 6 years. But then for Jimmy, time's been 10 years. Okay, so he's got the other end of my wormhole. And then I've got my wormhole up here. So if Jimmy were to step through my wormhole, not only would he be traversing space, he would also be going 4 years into the past.
Crazy.
Now that there's no violation of. Now, if I took that same wormhole and I accelerate all the way back to Earth, and then we line those two wormholes up, well, now we're 8 years apart. Okay, so then you could step through the wormhole and step 8 years into the past, or back to 8 years in the future.
Exactly. Yep, that all works out on paper too. I've seen the math.
It sure does. Yeah. So what we're saying is that, yeah, time travel could exist, but it would have to have a point of origin for the original place that you travel back to. that could always be that point of origin. So maybe that's why we don't have any time travelers, right? Because we've not created that portal that'll be needed to send travelers back into the past.
Right. And in order to create a wormhole, we have to have some materials which we've never seen in nature and we don't know how to produce, or we have to have a wormhole that exists naturally, which we've never seen. Yeah. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And be able to move it around.
Right. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we've never seen a wormhole in nature.
Well, and the truth is, if it did naturally exist, well, no matter how it exists, it could already, let's say naturally, it could pass through time already, because its velocity may be in the universe, if it's been around since the beginning of time. You may be stepping into the future or past. You wouldn't know, coming out the other side.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, absolutely possible. I mean, the trickiest part of it really is a stable wormhole that wouldn't kill you with radiation when you went through it. I mean, we don't know that these exist, but it works on paper. It works, the math will work. So, I mean, it's possible. Who knows? Now, here's something that I wanted to bring. Did you have something else?
No. Go ahead. I've got something to close this out with.
Well, one of the things that you see in Star Trek and also Superman, right? It's like Superman can go really fast. Like spoiler alert, Christopher Reeve, Superman, right?
Yeah, the Richard Donner films.
Lois Lane dies, right? And then Superman decides to go up in space and travel back in time, go faster than the speed of light, travel back in time, and then save Lois Lane, right?
Yeah.
So how is that possible? Why is that? Also, Star Trek uses this device all the time. They've done it in a few movies. They did it in
the one where
Star
they
Trek
save the
4,
whales.
The Voyage Home.
Yeah.
They do it on several episodes. They did it in
Star Trek Next Generation First Contact.
I'm not sure how they even come back, though. But anyway, so if you remember that clock that we were talking about on the top of Jimmy's house, as the faster we go, the slower it looks, right? Yeah. Now, let's say for a moment that one little caveat of Einstein was wrong, that somehow we can go faster than the speed of light. Let's just say it's possible. Now, again, the laws of physics say no.
Yeah, I'm in the no camp.
I mean, that's everything that's ever been tested about Einstein's theory of relativity has been dead accurate. I mean, completely accurate. Some things have only been tested, like gravitational waves. Some aspects of his theories have only been tested very recently, and every time it's been absolutely true. The math works exactly as predicted.
Yeah. Einstein's apple is tastier than Newton's.
Right. So anyway, but let's just for a moment theoretically say that we can go faster than the speed of light. So I'm looking at that big clock on the top of Jimmy's house, and I'm in my spaceship, and I'm flying through space, and the faster I go, Jimmy's clock looks like it starts going slower. But what if I go the speed of light? Okay, suddenly I'm going at the same speed that the light is leaving Jimmy's clock. So it looks like the clock has stopped. Now, let's say I go faster than the speed of light. What's it going to look like? It's going to look like the clock is going backwards. And that's where they get the idea of time travel by going faster than the speed of light.
Crazy.
So anyway, that's a device that they use. And then you don't have to worry about the whole spatial thing, right? About because they're in a spaceship already out in space. So you don't have to worry about, hey, I'm a time traveler. I'm going to build a time machine, and then
I'm already traveling in space and time.
Yeah, I'm already traveling through space. The only thing is, I mean, they really got to travel fast, way faster than the speed of light, whatever. And for whatever reason, they got a slingshot around the sun. I don't know, in Star Trek.
They got to push that button that the guys have in the Fast and the Furious. That makes them go really fast.
And then they always get all wobbly and woozy, and they...
they throw up at the end.
Yeah, and then it's like they pass out and they wake up and they're back in time. That happens every time. I'm not sure why that is, but I mean, they're going back in time hundreds of years, so we're talking how fast would they have to go? Right. Very fast.
So what we've discovered here is that time travel in the future, absolutely capable of doing that. Time travel in the past, only theoretical, and we haven't really seen anybody except for this Ron Mallett guy create something that may actually be traveling in the past. Still more work to be done there. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to go through a couple of movies on time travel.
All right.
First of all, I want to ask you, what's your favorite time travel movie off the top of your head?
Okay, the first one that came to mind, and I just saw it, so you're probably going to hate it, but First Contact by Star Trek.
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, it's only because I just watched it just recently. Remember me telling you a few episodes ago that I just got Paramount, and I kind of binged a whole bunch of Star Trek. But let me think a little deeper. You know what? Back to the Future is really fun.
That's a fun one.
It's not serious.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a real fun movie, and it's as good as any of the others. I mean, you know what? Actually, the one you mentioned earlier, the independent film. You know what? Come to think of it, I would have to say that would probably be my favorite. What's it called?
Primer. Yeah.
Primer. Yeah, that if you want to talk about serious time travel science fiction movie to really make you think, it would have to be Primer.
I agree. So I'm with you there. But what's your favorite time travel movie just for fun?
Back to the Future.
I think mine's Bill and Ted's.
Oh my gosh, I never even thought about Bill and Ted.
It might be Bill and Ted 2 with the death.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I forgot all about Bill and Ted. That's an awesome film. Yeah.
So we have a bunch of time travel.
White Stallion. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So
don't worry, they get better.
So I'm gonna roll through a handful of these, given what we've talked about, and I want to see where we fall out on whether or not, based on how we understand time travel works today in the science community, if we think this is possible or not possible. Back to the Future. I think not possible.
Not possible. Okay.
Edge of Tomorrow. That's that Tom Cruise film where he keeps dying because he does stupid movies. I love it too. Good. That's a great film.
Yeah, I forgot about that one too, man. That one's really good.
As a matter of fact, Edge of Tomorrow, I'm going to group these together, Edge of Tomorrow and Groundhog Day, because they're very similar in how they operate. Mm-hmm. So do you think that's possible or not possible?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, and who knows, with the whole temporal field thing.
I think maybe possible for that one.
That one, I don't think we understand enough about time. So maybe, especially
I'm
Edge of Tomorrow, where it seems like the flow of time can be affected like that.
Yeah.
But it is sort of a Groundhog Day, like a serious Groundhog Day.
It's like
movie,
multiple
right?
universe theory, right? And a lot of physicists believe that might be possible, that it could be multiple universes, and that's how you resolve paradoxes. Right,
and that's one thing we didn't discuss, right? I think we started down that path. Essentially, it's like what happens in the grandfather paradox, right? If Jimmy goes back in time, he said his grandfather was a dick.
Yeah, he's a dick.
I was going to say just prevent my grandma and grandpa from ever getting married, but
I don't want to kill anybody, but I mean,
okay. But anyway, the grandfather paradox. You go back in time, you prevent your father or your mother from being born somehow. You prevent your grandmother and your grandfather from ever meeting somehow. So then what happens to you? Okay, so your parent was never born, so you were never born. But here I am. I'm still here. So I think that, and then again, it's just like the butterfly effect. I don't think it would even have to be anything that drastic to change time, right? The butterfly effect.
Right. You just step on a butterfly and then you've changed all kinds of stuff.
Just having a casual conversation with someone in the street, or just to say, I'm a time traveler from the future. I don't know. Maybe you talk to the wrong person and they go choose a different path in life, and it doesn't matter. I think just existing in the past would have to create a parallel universe,
right?
The multiverse, which is exactly where we are with the Tom Cruise movie,
right? I mean, Edge of Tomorrow or Groundhog Day, either one.
He's able to go back in the past and not necessarily change the past, but he gets to go back to a point in time and create a parallel universe in which he wants to live in. Right? Like all the other ones must have continued to exist, the ones where the aliens win.
Right. Yeah.
But he finally found the one that he could exist in.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a great movie. I've seen that a few times.
Okay, I have on my list here Superman, which you already talked about. So this is where Superman goes up, flies around planet Earth, and makes planet Earth rotate backwards in time. So possible or not possible?
Well, yeah.
Not possible. Yeah.
Well, again, yeah, superluminal traveling faster than the speed of light. Just, right now the laws of physics say no. I mean, I'm hoping someday maybe they're wrong somehow. Maybe, I mean, Einstein's not been proven wrong yet, but I hope there is some type of shortcut around there. I hope someday we can travel through the stars and see what's out there. But as it stands right now, we don't have the time to do it.
So just a couple more movies here. We've talked about Looper. We've talked about Interstellar. Possible. We've talked about Planet of the Apes. Possible. But
well,
I'm gonna.
I will say Interstellar also relies on a wormhole.
That's true. But that specific scene we talked about didn't.
True.
Right.
That is true.
So, Army of Darkness.
This is my boomstick. Absolutely.
Yes.
That is the most realistic of all of them.
I was going to say that. I mean, if anything's most realistic, it's Bruce Campbell. He defies time, logic, reason, everything. Shop smart.
Shop smart.
Shop
smart.
All right. Now I'm going to bring up two more, and then we're going to close it out. Arrival. Now, this is a twist.
That is awesome.
This is a twist because it is the block universe. It's the idea
All right,
that...
now, spoiler alert. Hang on a second. Arrival, science fiction movie. It's making the round on Amazon or Netflix right now.
Yeah, it's free.
It's a relatively new movie. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. Maybe plug your ears for a couple of minutes. It's very cool. Very cool.
Right. But the essential idea in this movie is that an alien race has a language in which their perception of the universe is as a block universe, as in which
like the aliens from Slaughterhouse-Five.
Exactly.
They can see all of time at one time.
Exactly. So, and when they speak, their language communicates that. So communicates that time is not relevant. It's all happened. So past, present, future is all the same.
And somehow it affects the woman, the scientist, the linguist. It affects her to where she can start experiencing time the same way when she figures this out. So, and then let's leave it at that. Let's not talk any more about that.
Right, but time travel in the case of the Arrival, what do you think? If block universe is true, I think it's possible.
I don't know.
That's the crux, though. That's the crux, right?
I like that, though. I mean, I like the film, but again, it relies on aliens being able to do this space travel and everything. So, who knows? Who knows? Maybe. It would be so strange to perceive your entire life from beginning to end. I mean...
indistinguishable from one another.
We couldn't do that.
Yeah. It would mess us up. She's able to handle it.
It's like, how do you get out of bed? I just think...
Well, think about this. She's able to handle it because she's a woman, and she has like 1.5 million connections per neuron, whereas we have 2. So men can handle the way of thinking of multiple universes.
Well, it's sort of like in the book Slaughterhouse-Five, right? They know how the universe ends because they're experimenting. The aliens are experimenting with the new flying saucer fuel, and they blow up the universe, right? I mean, now it sounds silly, but... this book is really more about symbolism and some other things, okay? But they say, and it drives Billy Pilgrim crazy because he's like, well, why don't you just not do that, right? And they're like, that's our fate. We have to do it because that's what we do.
Yeah, time is set.
Time is immutable. Time is immutable.
Exactly.
Right? You can't change
Well
it.
said.
Even though they can see it well in advance. And they see everything they're going to do tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. They're going to see the bad things that befall them and the good things. But those aliens choose to focus on the good things that are to come or that have already happened or are happening now, right? It's all one. It's all the same. Man. Oh, yeah, I don't think I could handle that.
No.
I like surprises.
Exactly. So we got a couple more movies here. Frequency. This is a clever one. So this movie was with Dennis Quaid and is John Caviezel.
Is that where he's talking to his son through a radio?
Exactly. That's the one.
Yeah, okay. I don't know that I ever saw that one.
So Brian Greene, who's a physicist, was one of the guys who assisted with this film, gave them information from a physics standpoint on the film. So the idea is that there is some kind of wormhole that exists in nature to a degree that this father is able to communicate through a radio and send a radio signal through this wormhole. I think they'd say it's sunspots or something like that, but the idea was a wormhole, I think. Mm-hmm. And the communication's two-way and going back and forth through this wormhole so that the father and son can communicate to each other, solve a murder mystery, and talk about these different things. Now, they do have that same weird kind of thing where the father, I think he burns the desk or something at one point, and then it gradually shows...
Spoiler alert.
Right, it gradually shows up on the son's desk. And the son's like 30 or something, so it's not like a little kid.
Right.
But it gradually shows up on the desk. That's not how it would happen. I mean, it would spontaneously show up. I mean, it would have always been there.
Yeah, it wouldn't fade or not fade, right?
Yeah.
And that and you see that in time travel movies too, where they make the change, but they can remember everything that happened. Sometimes they can't.
Right.
Sometimes they just go about their day and they never knew. Only us as the audience knew that they changed that thing in the past.
I think this is a sort of possible one. I mean, some of the details with the desk burning and stuff, and not so much, but communicating through a wormhole, maybe.
Why not? I mean, we've already established that if somehow wormholes exist in nature, they could very literally traverse many years, probably even thousands, maybe millions of years, just depending on where they were in the Big Bang. I don't know. But most definitely they could not only connect distance, they could connect time too. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the last ones I want to hit here is two Terry Gilliam films. Terry Gilliam is famously one of the Monty Python crew. He's the one that did all the animations, the only American in the group. He became a director, and he directed films such as Brazil, Time Bandits, and 12 Monkeys. So if we look at 12 Monkeys, what do you think? Possible or not possible?
I love 12 Monkeys. Spoiler alert. So there's been, and of course this is pre-pandemic when this film was made, but there is a plague in the future. Most of humanity lives underground, sort of an apocalyptic plague. And they invent this time travel device, but there's in the future, which is Bruce Willis's present, there's things that I guess they're looking to stop it, and some people are not. It's really cool. It's a mind bender. You kind of get the idea that maybe he's crazy and he meets a girl and she thinks he's nuts, but then he predicts something that happens. It's all national news and things. And I don't know. It's a neat film, really neat film. They made a series out of it too. I never watched it.
Yeah. The movie is possible, I think, because it doesn't violate any rules of time as far as physics go. Everything is pre-decided. Everything's going to play out the way it's supposed to play out. You can't change anything. He dies at the end. I mean, spoiler alert. But I mean, this movie's been out since the 90s, so screw you guys.
And also, but it's like it had always been, and that's something that you see a lot in time travel movies. It's like him traveling back to the past was always. He remembered it as a kid. He remembered seeing himself at the airport as a 12-year-old kid. He saw himself. He talks about it earlier in the film. I saw this man run and do this thing. But then it had always been. In other words, it's just a loop.
Yeah.
I love that when they do that and they do it well. Yeah.
Okay, so our final movie is one of my all-time favorites, is Terry Gilliam's The Time Bandits. Do you remember how that movie goes?
Man, it's been so long.
Right, it's been a long time for me as well. But essentially you have a kid who gets caught up in this epic adventure of dwarfs who time travel. I will say that I don't think this one's possible in terms of realistic time travel, but it's a great addition to Terry Gilliam's. As a matter of fact, I think it might have been his first film.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I remember it being funny.
Right.
I mean,
and Terry Gilliam considers 3 of his films to be like a trilogy of imagination. It's Brazil, if you've ever seen that film, it's really good. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen and Time Bandits are the 3 films.
Yeah, I can see the connection for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, not so much, I think, in terms of realistic, but it's a fun film. I don't know if it holds up over time because I haven't seen it in a long time, but when I watched it as a kid, I loved it. Hey, I got another joke for you. The past, the present, and the future walked into a bar. It was tense.
That's a good one.
Thought you'd like that one.
I like it.
Hey, did you hear Disney is making a crossover between Star Wars and Back to the Future, where a time machine is half car, half person? It's called Mandalorian.
That's dumb.
That's so stupid it made you laugh.
I know. I love stupid jokes. I love that. I love real corny jokes.
Well, I'll tell you a really good time travel joke tomorrow.
I'm going to travel to the future, though. I want to hear it now.
Well, then, in that case, I'll tell it to you yesterday.
Okay. Well, all right, man. Do you have anything else for time travel, Jim?
No, I think we've exhausted this one.
Yeah, I think we've ran out of time for this
that's
episode.
Terrible.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. Please visit our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store and ways to support the show. You can find a link there to go to Patreon if you'd like to subscribe and help us out and help us keep the lights on, so to speak. And you'll get access to our new show called Weird Wonders that is exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, where Jimmy lets loose with his bizarre sense of humor. To check out Facebook, where many of the news stories that you hear and more can be found. And you know what? When you're on Facebook, or if you check us out on YouTube or any of those things, don't forget to like or up thumb us and do all that kind of stuff. That actually matters, believe it or not. Helps other people find it. And that's what we're all about, some growth. So if you like the show, just tell a friend, tell a coworker, tell a family member, say, man, check out this Cosmic Sponge. Those dudes are A-OK.
They're brilliant.
Yeah, spread the word, man. Spread the love. Spread the love. Well, all right. With all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And I'm Jimmy Coe. Keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll see you next week.
Okay, man, if you could travel back in time, what would you do? And change something. What would you change?
I could go back in time and I could change anything. Man, I would probably go back and make the Fox executives not cancel Firefly. I love that show.
If I could go back in time, I'd redo this episode.
If you could go back in time, would you kill Hitler? Would you stop Stalin? Nah, I would make sure Firefly got another season.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If I could go back in time, I would stop him from making Star Trek 5. It's like, no, William Shatner does not need to direct.
Absolutely no.
All right, man, let's get out of here.
Definitely. We'll see you next week, man. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders news and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Damn, dude. I think I lost it. Temporal paradox. Let's see.
Temporal paradox. Those are a bitch. Every time I have one of those temporal paradoxes, I gotta go pee. I really gotta go pee.
Do you need to pee?
I do need to pee.
Oh, go ahead, because I'm looking this up.
Cool.